November 8th, 1944. Near Morville-l'Évêque, France. 2:34 p.m. Staff Sergeant Reuben Rivers is commanding a Sherman tank, one of 5 M4 Shermans from Company A, 761 Tank Battalion, advancing through a tree line towards suspected German positions. His tank, designated Taffy 3, is 400 yards ahead of the others, scouting the approach. Through his periscope, Rivers spots movement. 3 German Panzer IV tanks, hull-down positions behind a small rise, 800 yards distant. They haven't seen the Shermans yet. In 60 seconds they will, and when they do, the Germans have every advantage. Better armor, better guns, better defensive positions. Rivers doesn't panic. He doesn't try to engage alone. He reaches for the radio transmitter mounted inside his turret and keys the mic. All Able tanks, this is Able 1. 3 Panzers, hull down, bearing 045, range 800. I'm going to draw their fire. Able 2 and Able 3 flank right through that wood line. Able 4 and Able 5, direct fire support on my mark. 20 seconds. That's how long it takes Rivers to communicate a complete tactical plan to 4 other tank commanders. Each commander hears the same information simultaneously. Each commander acknowledges. Each commander knows exactly what the other tanks are doing. The Shermans execute. Rivers moves Taffy 3 forward, deliberately exposing his tank to draw German attention. The Panzers spot him and open fire. Rivers reverses into cover while Able 2 and Able 3 are already moving. Their commanders heard Rivers' initial transmission and started flanking before he was even hit. The German tank platoon commander has no radio communication with the other 2 tanks in his platoon. He can't tell them enemy tanks are flanking from the wood line. He can't coordinate a defensive response. His only option is hand signals and shouting, neither of which work when you're buttoned up inside a tank under fire. Able 2 and Able 3 emerge from the wood line at the German tank's flanks. Able 4 and Able 5 engage from the front. The Germans are taking fire from 3 directions. Their platoon commander frantically waves to his other tanks, but by the time the other commanders understand what's happening, it's too late. 4 minutes. 3 German Panzer IVs destroyed. 0 American losses. The 761st moves forward. This scene repeated across France, Belgium, and Germany throughout late 1944 and early 1945. German tank crews with superior armor and guns defeated by American tank crews with something the Germans often didn't have: working radios in every tank and crews trained to use them. If you want World War II stories where mundane-sounding technology like working radios created battlefield advantages that superior weapons couldn't overcome, subscribe now. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. This is November 1944. The 761st Tank Battalion is about to prove that talking to each other wins tank battles. And the Germans, fighting blind, unable to coordinate between vehicles, are about to learn that lesson the hard way. In 1944, the United States Army equipped every single tank with at least one radio capable of communicating with other tanks and with infantry. This wasn't optional equipment. It was standard. Every tank rolled off the production line with a radio already installed. The primary radio in Sherman tanks was the SCR-528, a frequency-modulated radio capable of transmitting and receiving voice communication over 5 to 10 miles depending on terrain. The commander and gunner both had headsets connected to the radio. The commander had a throat microphone and could transmit while operating the tank. This meant that in any American tank platoon, typically 5 tanks, all 5 commanders could communicate with each other continuously during combat. They could share enemy positions, coordinate movement, call for fire support, report damage, and execute complex tactical maneuvers in real time. The Germans did not have equivalent radio saturation in their armored forces. German tank radio equipment in 1944 varied by tank type and unit priority. High-priority panzer divisions might have radios in 60 to 70% of tanks. Average Wehrmacht armored units had radios in maybe 40 to 50% of tanks. In some units formed late in the war, radio availability could drop to 20 to 30%. The standard was the platoon commander's tank had a radio. The other tanks in the platoon might or might not. If they did have radios, they might be receive-only, able to hear commands, but not transmit responses or share information. This created a fundamental asymmetry in how American and German tank units functioned during combat. American tank platoons operated as networked units. Every commander had the same information simultaneously. If one tank spotted enemy positions, all tanks knew within seconds. If one tank was hit, all commanders knew immediately and could adjust. German tank platoons operated more like individual vehicles with limited communication between them. The platoon commander could radio orders to tanks that had receive-capable radios, but getting information back was harder. Coordinating complex movements required visual signals, hand gestures through open hatches, or physically stopping tanks so commanders could talk face-to-face. The reasons for this gap were partly doctrinal and partly logistical. Doctrinally, German tank tactics in early war years emphasized concentrated breakthroughs with armor operating in mass formations where visual command and control was possible. This worked when German armor had initiative, was advancing, and could concentrate forces. By 1944, those conditions no longer applied. German armor was fighting defensive battles, often outnumbered, across scattered positions. The doctrinal assumptions that made limited radios acceptable in 1940 to 1941 no longer held. But changing the radio situation required resources Germany didn't have. Logistically, manufacturing and installing radios in every tank was expensive and complicated. Radios in 1944 used vacuum tubes, fragile, power-hungry components that required careful installation and maintenance. In German tank production, radios competed with other priorities like thicker armor and bigger guns. The United States had industrial capacity to provide radios to every tank without compromising other production. Germany had to make choices. More radios meant fewer tanks or thinner armor or some other trade-off. German military planners chose to prioritize firepower and armor over communication. This decision had consequences they didn't fully appreciate until American armor started exploiting the communication advantage. The 761st Tank Battalion received its Shermans during training at Camp Hood, Texas in 1943. Every tank came equipped with SCR 528 radios. The battalion trained extensively on radio procedures, radio discipline, communication protocols, coordinating movements via radio, calling for artillery support, reporting contact. This training was standard for all U.S. armored units. What made the 761st different was the context. They were black tank crews in a segregated army that didn't believe black soldiers could operate complex equipment effectively. Radio operation isn't technically difficult. It's basically talking and listening. But it requires discipline, clear communication, and ability to process information while under stress. The Army's racist assumptions said black soldiers couldn't do this reliably. The 761st's training performance contradicted these assumptions. They achieved radio communication proficiency scores comparable to or better than white armored units. They demonstrated ability to coordinate complex maneuvers via radio. They showed that skin color had exactly zero correlation with radio operating capability. When the 761st deployed to France in October 1944 and entered combat in November, they brought excellent technical training in radio communication and awareness that they were under scrutiny. Any failure would be used to justify continued segregation. Their first major engagement came at Morville-le-Vicq on November 8, 1944. The battalion was attached to the 26th Infantry Division, supporting infantry advance against German defensive positions. Intelligence indicated German armor in the area, Panzer IVs and possibly Panthers. The engagement demonstrated the radio advantage immediately. 761st Tank commanders coordinated their movements, shared enemy position information, called for artillery support through radio contact with infantry units, and executed flanking maneuvers that required precise timing between multiple tanks. German tank crews faced the same engagement with fractional radio availability. Platoon commanders could give orders to some tanks, but couldn't get real-time information back. When American tanks appeared from unexpected directions, German crews couldn't quickly communicate the threat. The results? 761st destroyed 13 German tanks over 2 days, while losing 6 Shermans. Given that German tanks had superior armor and guns, a roughly 2-to-1 kill ratio favoring the force with inferior armor was remarkable. The difference wasn't crew quality or tactical genius. It was communication. One captured German tank officer, interrogated after the Morville engagement, described the experience. "We could see American tanks maneuvering but could not coordinate response. Only platoon commander's tank could communicate. By the time visual signals reached other tanks, American positions had changed. We were fighting as isolated vehicles, while Americans fought as coordinated unit." That statement captures the fundamental asymmetry. German tanks fought as individual vehicles that happened to be near each other. American tanks fought as networked systems where information flowed continuously between units. December 1944. The 761st Tank Battalion is operating near Tillet, Belgium. The Battle of the Bulge has begun. German forces have launched their last major offensive, and the 761st is part of the Allied response. The terrain is brutal. Rolling hills covered in snow, scattered forests, limited roads. Visibility is poor. Temperature is below freezing. Tank crews face German armor that includes Tiger and Panther tanks, vehicles with significantly better armor and firepower than Shermans. On December 31, 1944, a company encounters a German tank platoon, 3 Panther tanks supported by infantry, holding a road junction. The Panthers are hull down behind a low ridge, positioned to cover the approaches. Their frontal armor is effectively immune to Sherman 75mm guns at any range beyond point blank. A direct assault would be suicide. Sherman frontal armor couldn't withstand Panther 75mm guns, and Sherman guns couldn't penetrate Panther frontal armor. But weather had grounded Allied air support. Artillery was engaged elsewhere. Tank destroyers weren't available. The 761st Shermans had to handle the Panthers themselves, or the advance would stall. Lieutenant John Long, commanding the lead Sherman, doesn't try to engage frontally. He uses the radio. "All able tanks, this is Able 1. 3 Panthers, hull down at road junction. Can't penetrate frontal. Able 2 and Able 3, work around left through that tree line, get a flank shot. Able 4 and Able 5, suppressive fire on my command. Keep 'em buttoned up while flankers position." The coordination happens in under 2 minutes. Able 2 and Able 3 acknowledge and begin working left through trees that provide cover from Panther guns. Able 4 and Able 5 position to provide direct fire, not to penetrate, just to force German crews to stay inside their tanks with hatches closed, limiting their visibility. Long contacts artillery support frequency and provides coordinates. Artillery responds, limited ammunition available, can provide 1 fire mission, 2 minutes. Long coordinates with the flanking tanks. Able 2, Able 3, artillery fire in 90 seconds. Engage Panthers from flank immediately after artillery lifts. Able 4, Able 5, suppressive fire starts in 60 seconds. The German Panther platoon commander has limited ability to respond to this coordination. He can see two Shermans positioning for direct fire, but he doesn't know about the flanking tanks because his view is restricted. If he had working radios to other tanks in his platoon, he could have one tank watch the left flank while he focused on the Shermans to his front. But he doesn't have that capability. His tank has a radio. The other two Panthers may or may not have radios, and if they do, they're likely receive only. He can't get information from them about what they're seeing. Artillery hits the German infantry positions. Able 4 and Able 5 opened fire on the Panthers, shells bouncing off frontal armor but forcing the German crews to stay buttoned up. The Panther platoon commander focuses on the direct threat. Able 2 and Able 3 emerge from the tree line at the Panthers' left flank. Side armor on Panthers is significantly weaker than frontal armor. At 200-yard range, Sherman's 75mm guns can penetrate Panther side armor. Both Shermans fire multiple rounds. Two Panthers destroyed within 30 seconds. The third Panther commander realizes his platoon is under attack from the flank, tries to pivot his tank, but Able 1 has moved forward and fires on the Panther's now exposed side as it turns. 3 Panthers destroyed, 0 American losses. Total engagement time: 11 minutes from initial contact to last Panther destroyed. The post-engagement analysis documented in the 761st after-action report notes: radio coordination between tank commanders essential to engagement success. Simultaneous flanking maneuver, suppressive fire, and artillery coordination would be impossible without continuous radio communication between all units. A captured German tank officer described his experience. "We had superior tanks, but could not coordinate defense." American tanks appeared to know each other's positions and actions continuously. Our commander could not communicate rapidly enough to respond. By the time we understood the attack pattern, we were under fire from directions we could not defend. This pattern repeated across hundreds of engagements. American tank units used radio coordination to offset armor and firepower disadvantages. The specific tactics varied, sometimes flanking maneuvers, sometimes coordinated artillery support, sometimes one tank drawing fire while others maneuvered. But the common factor was real-time communication between all tanks. The radio advantage extended beyond tank-to-tank communication. American tanks could communicate directly with infantry units, artillery batteries, air support, and command elements. This created a networked battlefield where information flowed rapidly and coordination happened in real time. One specific advantage: calling for artillery fire support during tank engagements. If American tanks encountered German armor in positions they couldn't directly assault, they could immediately radio artillery coordinates. Response time from request to shells arriving could be 3 to 5 minutes with experienced artillery units. German tank crews had this capability too. Platoon commander tanks could radio artillery requests, but the process was often slower. The difference of 2 to 3 minutes in artillery response time could determine engagement outcomes. The 761st specifically trained on coordinating with artillery. During their time at Camp Hood, they practiced calling fire support, adjusting based on observation, and timing tank movements with artillery fire. This training paid off in combat. 761st after-action reports document dozens of engagements where coordinated artillery fire suppressed German positions while tanks maneuvered. Radio communication in 1944 wasn't magic. It was physics applied to warfare. Understanding why it mattered requires understanding what happens in tank combat when you can coordinate versus when you can't. A tank battle is fundamentally about information and positioning. You need to know where enemy tanks are, where friendly tanks are, what the terrain allows, and where you can move to gain advantage. The side that processes this information faster and coordinates better usually wins, regardless of who has bigger guns or thicker armor. Without radio communication, information flow in tank combat is slow and limited. A tank commander can see what's visible from his position, maybe 800 to 1200 yards in good terrain, less in forests or urban areas. Getting information about what other friendly tanks are seeing requires visual observation or physical communication, stopping tanks so commanders can talk. Visual observation works when tanks are close together, but in combat, tanks spread out. Staying in close formation makes you vulnerable to artillery. So tanks operate at distances where visual observation of details becomes unreliable. Radio communication changes the information flow fundamentally. Tank commanders can share information regardless of distance, within radio range, while moving, while under fire, without any delay, beyond speaking and listening time. This speed difference compounds over time. In a 10-minute engagement, American tank commanders communicating via radio might exchange 20 to 30 pieces of information: enemy positions, friendly positions, damage reports, tactical changes. German tank commanders without comprehensive radios might exchange 3 to 5 pieces of information. That information differential creates decision-making speed differential. American commanders build more complete picture of the battlefield faster, which enables better tactical decisions. The physics of radio communication also created range advantages. The SCR-528 radio in Sherman tanks had effective range of 5 to 10 miles in good conditions. This meant American tank units could coordinate across battalion-level distances. German tank radios had comparable range when they existed, but the limited availability meant fewer communication paths existed. If you're learning about World War II stories where mundane logistics like working radios in every tank created battlefield advantages, subscribe now. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and which overlooked technology gap we should cover next. The physics also mattered within individual tanks. Sherman tank intercoms connected all crew positions: commander, gunner, loader, driver, assistant driver. Everyone could hear radio transmissions and could hear commands from the commander. This created a situation where entire crew was aware of tactical situation. German tank intercoms varied by tank model, but were generally less comprehensive. In tanks, where only the commander and gunner had intercoms, the loader and driver had very limited awareness. The cumulative effect of these communication advantages, tank-to-tank coordination, larger-scale unit coordination, and within-tank crew coordination, was that American armored units could execute more complex tactics, adapt faster to changing situations, and coordinate across larger distances. One German tank officer, captured after the war, described the experience. American tanks always seemed to know where we were and could coordinate their attacks. Our tanks often fought as individuals even when operating together. We had better armor and weapons, but could not use them effectively because we could not coordinate as well as Americans. Information flow was our biggest disadvantage. Radio communication was the technology that enabled superior coordination. It wasn't exotic, it wasn't secret. It was simply reliable communication infrastructure provided to every tank in the US Army and only partially provided to German armored forces. The 761st Tank Battalion used this advantage systematically. Their training emphasized radio discipline, clear communication, and coordinated tactics. They entered combat with every tank equipped with working radios and crews trained to use them effectively. The result was engagements where the 761st achieved favorable kill ratios despite armor disadvantages. They destroyed German tanks by coordinating flanking maneuvers, combining fire from multiple directions, calling artillery support at critical moments, and sharing information in real time. The physics of communication defeated the physics of armor. Radio waves traveled faster than tank movements. Information shared by radio enabled better tactical decisions. Better tactical decisions led to favorable outcomes even when fighting against superior individual vehicles. The 761st Tank Battalion fought for 183 consecutive days in combat from November 1944 through May 1945. They advanced through France, Belgium, Germany, and Austria. They fought in the Battle of the Bulge and the final drive into Germany. Their combat record included destroying 258 enemy vehicles. They did this while facing the dual challenge of fighting German forces and dealing with systematic discrimination from their own military. They were using radios to coordinate tactics that defeated German armor while being denied service at base facilities. The radio coordination tactics they used were doctrine, standard American armored tactics taught to all tank units. But the 761st's execution was particularly effective because they'd trained extensively on radio discipline and because their crews understood they were under scrutiny. One significant engagement demonstrating their radio coordination capabilities occurred at Tillit, Belgium during the Battle of the Bulge. Company A was tasked with taking a town held by German forces, including Panther tanks and infantry. The company commander used radio to coordinate a three-pronged assault. First platoon would engage from the front to fix German attention. Second platoon would flank left through difficult terrain. Third platoon would provide fire support. The coordination required precise timing. Radio communication enabled the timing. First platoon leader coordinated with company commander on when to begin engagement. Second platoon leader reported progress and signaled when in flanking position. Third platoon leader monitored both frequencies and positioned for support fire. The assault succeeded with Germans retreating after losing multiple tanks. The after-action report specifically credited radio coordination for the success. But the recognition for this success wasn't framed around the 761st's effective use of communication technology. It was framed as black troops performed adequately under white officer leadership. The role of systematic training in radio procedures, the crew's discipline in executing coordinated tactics, none of that made it into the narrative that reached higher command. The 761st received a Presidential Unit Citation for their service. Individual soldiers received Bronze Stars, Silver Stars, and other decorations. But the specific tactical advantages they exploited, radio coordination, combined arms integration, effective use of communication technology, weren't highlighted in ways that challenged prevailing racist assumptions. Post-war, when military historians studied American armored operations in Europe, the radio advantage was noted as a general American strength. But these studies rarely specifically examined how black armored units like the 761 Saint used this advantage. The broader narrative became, American tanks had radios, which helped despite armor disadvantages. True, but incomplete. A more accurate narrative. American tank crews were trained to exploit radio communication for coordinated tactics, which turned technological advantage into tactical superiority. The 761st's experience proved this narrative definitively. They faced German armor with superior guns and armor. They defeated German forces by using radios to coordinate flanking maneuvers, combined arms tactics, and information sharing. One veteran of the 761st, interviewed in the 1980s, described the frustration. We'd coordinate attacks using radio, execute maneuvers that required split-second timing, communicate with artillery and infantry and other tanks simultaneously. Then we'd be told we fought with courage, like that was the only thing that mattered. Nobody wanted to say we were good at the technical side. That would have meant admitting we were just as capable as white tank crews. The German perspective provides independent validation. Captured German tank officers consistently mentioned American communication superiority in interrogations. They described American tanks as fighting as single organism, while German tanks fought as separate vehicles. The kill ratios tell part of the story. The 761st is credited with destroying 258 enemy vehicles during their 183 days of combat. They lost approximately 71 tanks. A roughly 3.6 to 1 kill ratio favoring tanks with inferior armor and guns suggests that technical and tactical advantages more than compensated for vehicle-level disadvantages. The most decorated soldier in the 761st was Staff Sergeant Reuben Rivers, who continued fighting despite severe wounds and was killed in action on November 19, 1944. Rivers was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor in 1997, 53 years after his death. Rivers' Medal of Honor citation describes his bravery and determination. It doesn't mention that Rivers was also an excellent tank commander who used radio communication to coordinate with other tanks. His technical competence as tank commander was prerequisite for his heroism to be effective. But the citation focused on courage rather than competence. The 761st proved black soldiers could master complex technical equipment. They proved black crews could coordinate sophisticated tactics. They proved radio communication in the hands of well-trained soldiers created battlefield advantages regardless of the crew's race. But they weren't the facts the segregated military wanted to emphasize. The 761st Tank Battalion story demonstrates a principle that extends far beyond World War II tank warfare. Mundane technological advantages exploited by well-trained personnel often matter more than exotic capabilities. Radio communication in every tank wasn't exotic technology. It was simple, reliable equipment that enabled coordination. The advantage came from having radios in every tank and training crews to use them effectively. That combination created tactical superiority that superior German armor couldn't overcome. Modern military doctrine has absorbed this lesson thoroughly. Network-centric warfare, real-time information sharing, coordinated operations across multiple domains. These are foundational concepts in 21st century military operations. They all trace conceptual lineage to the same principle the 761st exploited. Information flow and coordination matter more than individual platform capabilities. A modern M1 Abrams tank has digital communication systems that can share targeting data, video feeds, and tactical information with other tanks, aircraft, infantry, and command elements simultaneously. The principle is the same as 1944. Coordinate, share information, fight as a networked force. But the 761st proved this principle before digital computers, before satellite communications, before any advanced technology. They proved it with vacuum tube radios, voice communication, and training that emphasized discipline and coordination. The lesson extends beyond military applications. Any complex operation where multiple elements need to coordinate benefits from reliable communication infrastructure and training in how to use it. For the 761st specifically, the radios were tools that let them execute tactics they'd trained on. The training was what made the tools effective. The combination was what created battlefield success. The broader World War II lesson about radio communication in American versus German armor has been studied extensively. Post-war analysis concluded that comprehensive radio equipment in all American tanks was one of the key factors enabling American armored forces to defeat German forces despite German advantages in individual tank quality. What's been less documented is how black armored units like the 761 Saint specifically exploited this advantage. Their training emphasized radio discipline and coordination. Their combat record demonstrated effective execution. That last point, discipline under fire, is worth emphasizing because it directly contradicted racist assumptions. The prevailing belief was that black soldiers lacked the discipline and intelligence for technical roles. Radio operation and coordination was technical. It required discipline, clear communication, ability to process information under stress, and teamwork. The 761st proved these racist assumptions were false. They mastered radio communication. They executed coordinated tactics. They processed information under intense stress. But the military didn't update its policies based on this evidence. Segregation continued. Black soldiers continued facing discrimination. It took years of pressure before military integration began in 1948, and even then, full integration took years to implement. The tragedy isn't just that black soldiers faced discrimination while serving. The tragedy is that the evidence of their capabilities, visible in their combat records, in their tactical sophistication, in their mastery of technical operations, was ignored or minimized for decades. Today, the U.S. military is integrated. Black Americans serve at every level, in every role, in every branch. The idea that black soldiers can't master technical operations is recognized as the racist nonsense it always was. But the lesson took too long to learn. The 761st proved in 1944 what shouldn't have needed proving. That capability has nothing to do with race, that well-trained soldiers of any background can master complex operations. We're making sure their story doesn't stay forgotten. If you want the 150 stories where mundane technology exploited by overlooked soldiers defeated exotic capabilities, subscribe now. Comment where you're watching from and which technological advantage story we should document next. The 761st Tank Battalion used radios to coordinate tactics that defeated superior German armor. They demonstrated that communication enables coordination, coordination enables tactical sophistication, and tactical sophistication defeats superior individual capabilities. Radio communication wasn't exotic. Having radios in every tank was logistics. Training crews to use them effectively was doctrine. But the combination created battlefield advantages that superior German armor and guns couldn't overcome. The 761st proved it across 183 days of combat, hundreds of engagements, and thousands of coordinated actions. They used radios to talk to each other while Germans fought blind. Physics defeats steel when you can coordinate and your enemy can't. The 761st proved it definitively. Remember them not just for their courage, but for their technical competence, their tactical sophistication, and their systematic exploitation of communication advantages. Working radios in every tank, training to use them, discipline to execute under fire. That's how black tank crews defeated better German armor. December 1944. Every Sherman in the 761 Saint had a radio. Most German platoons had one. The Germans never figured out why American tanks always seemed to know where each other were. Now you know.